The marsh had no horizon. It was a world of black water and thorned roots, where the fog hung low like a half-forgotten memory. The air tasted of rust and old rain. Somewhere in the mire, a lone figure moved, her hood drawn deep, her boots sinking with each slow step. In her hand, a lantern burned. It was no ordinary flame. It shifted between gold and sickly green, licking the air with slow, deliberate tongues. The light didn't flicker. It pulsed, as if it had a heartbeat. Every few moments, faces swam across its glass, pale, blurred, and gone again, like reflections glimpsed in a pond. Her name was Mareth. Once she'd been a river ferryman's daughter. Now, she was something else entirely. The marsh whispered her name in a voice that wasn't the wind. She didn't answer. She couldn't. The lantern had seen to that. They said it had been forged in a drowned temple, made to guide the souls of the lost across the Duskwoven's black waters. But when she first touched its cold brass handle, the flame had lunged up the glass like a starving thing and locked itself into her palm. That was 3 winters ago. She had not been able to put it down since. It wanted her to walk. It wanted her to find. The light pushed through the mist in a perfect circle, showing just enough to make the dark worse. Shapes moved at the edge of it. Tall, thin things with joints that bent wrong. They never stepped closer. Not yet. Mareth kept walking until she found the first sign. A ragged scrap of sailcloth, tangled in the reeds, painted with a black spiral. Her breath froze in her chest. She knew this mark. It meant a soul was waiting to be taken. The lantern's flames swelled, throwing long shadows across the water. The faces in the glass became sharper now. A man screaming soundlessly, a child with hollow eyes, a woman whose mouth was sewn shut. The light leaned toward the east. Mareth swallowed hard and turned in that direction. She didn't want to know who she'd find, but the marsh did. The fog thickened until the marsh became a labyrinth of silhouettes. Mareth's boots squelched in the muck, each step dragging against roots and unseen debris beneath the water's skin. The lantern's glow pressed outward, parting the mist in slow, reluctant folds. The flame inside was hungry now, its pulse quickening, rattling faintly against the glass like teeth in the cold. A shape emerged ahead, hunched and trembling at the water's edge. It was a man, or what was left of one. His skin was the color of drowned wood, mottled and swollen. His eyes were milked over, but locked onto her with the clarity of the damned. He didn't speak. His lips barely moved, whispering something the wind stole away. The lantern's light reached him, and the air changed. The reeds hissed like snakes. Mareth felt the tug, not in her arm, but in her bones, as the lantern pulled toward the man's chest. His shadow elongated, twisting unnaturally across the water until it pointed straight at her feet. "I don't want this," she rasped, her voice hoarse from years of silence. The man's jaw unhinged wider than bone should allow, and from it came a sound like wet cloth tearing. The marsh answered back, a chorus of distant cries, layered and deep, vibrating in the fog. The lantern flared, and the man's body collapsed inward, folding into itself, as though the space he occupied had been stolen away. The flame surged green, spinning shapes in its heart. There was the man again, but now behind glass, screaming without a voice. The pull eased. The light dimmed to its steady pulse. Mareth staggered back, her breath ragged. She knew the rules. The lantern only burned brighter with each soul it took, and it never gave them back. She could feel his weight now, added to the others, a silent passenger in the endless dark she carried. A splash came from the black water to her left. Something moved. Not a fish. Not anything meant to live here. The tall, thin shapes she'd glimpsed earlier were closer. Their outlines jagged. Their heads tilting in perfect unison. They did not wade. They floated inches above the surface, gliding toward where the man had vanished. The lantern's flame leaned west now, quivering like a finger pointing the way. The marsh groaned under her boots as she obeyed. Whatever lay ahead, she could feel it in her chest. Another soul, another face for the glass. Only this one would be harder to take. Mireth wrenched her arm sideways. The brass burned her palm, but the flame faltered long enough for Aaron's hand to slip past the circle of light and close around her wrist. The cold climbed, but with it came weight, real, human weight, tugging her toward him, toward the black water where the bells breathed. His mouth formed a word. Please. The lantern snapped back into command, jerking their joined hands to his chest. Green detonated. Aaron's body caved like wet paper, vanishing into the glass in a smear of pallid light. The bells stopped. So did the marsh. Mireth stood in the ringing aftermath, with her heart split down the middle, staring at the flame that now held his face among the others. It hovered near the surface, not sinking, looking out as if he had found a window rather than a prison. I'm sorry, she said to him, to herself, to the part of the marsh that would never forgive. The lantern cooled. The thin shapes drifted back, denied their spectacle. The bells began to move again, soft, approving. The light leaned north. A pull like a hooked line settled behind her ribs. She knew that direction too. The drowned temple. The place where the lantern was born or stolen. The place where it might be taught to let go. She wiped her eyes with the back of her sleeve and started walking. Erin's new weight sloshing in the flame, a heartbeat out of step with her own. The northern route narrowed until the reeds themselves became walls, their tips brushing above her hood. The ground softened into a slow seep, each step filling her boots with marsh water that reeked of copper and root rot. The lantern's glow cut a narrow tunnel through the fog, its green heart steady, purposeful. Somewhere far ahead, something breathed in rhythm with her own steps, drawing her forward. The first stones appeared like teeth, breaking the water's skin. Pillars crusted with lichen and barnacle, carved in spirals that wound into themselves until the eye lost focus. Myreth had seen drawings of these in a ferryman's archive. Remnants of a drowned temple to a god the river people never named aloud. That god was said to weigh souls like coin, keeping the ones it found valuable. The marsh opened into a black pool. Its center boiled faintly, though no wind stirred it. The water smelled wrong, not stagnant, but raw, like it had been drawn up from somewhere far deeper than the marsh's floor. Around the pool, the temple's ruin clung to life, a ring of shattered columns, each bound with iron chains sunk into the mud. At their tips, bells hung mute. The lantern shivered in her grasp. The faces within had gone still. Everyone turned toward the pool. Aaron's gaze was the clearest, fixed and unblinking, as though he could see something beneath the surface. She stepped between the columns. The ground there was firmer, studded with pale shells that cracked under her boots. The pool's boil grew stronger, throwing up a single black bubble that burst soundlessly. From the ripples, a shape rose. First a smear of darkness, then a humanoid form sheathed in dripping weeds. Its face was a mirror of the lantern's glass, smooth and shining, reflecting her own hooded figure back at her. The reflection spoke without the image moving. Bearer. The word had weight, tugging at her chest, as though a chain had been hooked there long ago. "You've come to return what you stole." "I never." Her voice cracked. She swallowed. "I didn't choose this." The shape tilted its head, water streaming from its hair. "No one chooses the bridge, only the crossing." It raised a hand of slick, root-like fingers. Beneath the water, something vast shifted. Slow, deliberate, circling the pool's floor. The lantern throbbed hot in her palm. The green light reached out toward the figure, brushing its weed-draped chest like a child seeking a parent. Faces pressed against the glass, mouths opening and closing without sound. Erin was still there, watching. "If I give them to you," she said, "will you let me go?" The shape laughed softly, like bubbles breaking in deep water. "Let you go? You are already gone, but you may choose where the light burns next." The water behind it split open as something colossal began to rise. She saw no face, only the suggestion of ribs and a spine, scaled in black stone. The lantern's flame surged, brighter than she had ever seen it, pulling her toward the edge. If she stepped closer, she knew what would happen. The temple would drink every soul she carried. The weight in her arm would vanish. The faces would fade, but the lantern would remain, empty, hungry again by dawn. Erin's eyes in the glass were steady. The pool's surface reached for her boots. The choice was here, and it would not wait. The water lapped against her toes, seeping into the leather, numbing her feet. The lantern's heat climbed her arm, a living current urging her to take the step that would close the distance to the figure in the pool. The faces inside swelled toward the glass, as though they could breach it if she only leaned forward. The shape's mirrored visage watched without blinking, patient as tide. Mireth thought of the marsh paths that had carried her here. The spiral-marked reed, the man folding into the glass, Erin's hand brushing hers before the lantern stole him away. Every soul had felt the same at the moment of taking. The weight, the cold, the way they slipped from the world as if falling backward. And every time she'd obeyed the flame's pull, because the alternative was to fight the thing welded to her hand until it burned her alive. She raised the lantern, and the green light spilled across the pool, striking the water like an open wound. The great shape beneath stirred, and the air thickened with a soundless roar. The temple's broken bells swayed once, chimes muffled under the weight of years. "I can give them to you," she said, her voice low, "but not like this." The figure cocked its head. "You would deny the crossing?" "I would end it." The lantern shuddered violently, heat biting through her glove. The glass fogged from within, faces distorting, mouths wide in silent rage. The green flared so brightly that the pool's depths became a mirror, showing 100 Mireths holding 100 lanterns, each walking paths through different nights. She clenched her jaw and plunged the flame into the water. It screamed, not in sound, but in light. A blinding, writhing flare that raced across the surface, into the temple's chains, up the pillars to the bells. Each bell rang once, loud enough to split the mist. The water convulsed, and the colossal shape below thrashed, sending waves slapping against her chest. The glass fractured in her grip. Light bled out, pale gold now, drifting away like smoke in water. The faces within softened, then dissolved. Erin was last to fade, his eyes never leaving hers until they were gone entirely. The lantern's weight left her hand, and the handle slid from her fingers into the pool, sinking without a ripple. The figure in the weeds straightened. Where its face had been, there was only black water. "No bridge remains," it said, and then it too sank. vanishing with the last of the light. The marsh was silent again. Mireth stood alone in the ring of pillars, her empty hand tingling with the ghost of heat. For the first time in 3 winters, she could breathe without the rhythm of another heartbeat pressing against hers. But the marsh did not release her path. Fog thickened at the pool's edge, curling into shapes that watched. Somewhere beyond, deep in the reeds, a single green light bloomed, faint and patient. She turned away from it and began walking south, not toward the light, but into the dark, her boots sinking deep in the mud. The marsh whispered her name again. This time she did not hear it. By the time the temple stones were swallowed by the fog, Mireth's legs felt carved from the same waterlogged wood that clung to the marsh banks. Every step pulled at her, as though the ground meant to keep her here forever. She pushed on, head down, listening to the absence where the lantern's pulse had once lived in her bones. Night fell without ceremony. The marsh didn't change much in the dark. It had never really been light here, but the sky closed in fully now, a blind weight pressing on the reeds. Without the lantern, her eyes adjusted slowly, finding their own way to parse shadow from shape. She passed the places she knew, the spiral-marked reed, the bell-posts, the mud-slick causeways where the thin shapes had glided. They were gone now. The water lay still. Her reflection stared back in each black pool, gaunt, hood slipping from her head, hair clinging damp to her cheeks. Hours later, her boots struck gravel, the marsh edge. Beyond it, stretched the low plain where the ferryman's path once cut to the village, a road she hadn't touched since the lantern had claimed her. She hesitated. The air here felt strange, thin, as if stepping forward might tear her away from more than the marsh. She looked back. Fog boiled where the reeds began, swallowing her trail. No light pulsed within it, not yet. But the Duskwoven never let a tool vanish without finding another hand to hold it. Somewhere, someone would see a glimmer in the dark, hear a whisper in the water, and take the first step toward carrying its weight. Mireth turned away from the thought. She walked toward the plain, her shadow long in the moon's cold glow. Behind her, in the heart of the marsh, the faintest green spark blinked to life, as steady as a heartbeat.